moderators on hand to delete any inappropriate comments and remove unwelcome guests, but we've done lots of these events recently and that shouldn't be necessary. I'll just start off by giving you a little bit of background information. So IASD Newark is a partnership between Newark College and an organisation called Aviation 360, and also a range of other industry partners. Aviation 360, who are joining us today on the call, is a team of industry specialists who advise air and space companies on attracting, educating and retaining the right people to succeed in their organisations. Together, we've worked with our wider partners in military and civil aviation to co-design these courses. What makes these programs unique in the UK is that the starting point has been the actual job roles of pilot, engineer and ground operations. So these courses will prepare you for your career as soon as you graduate. You'll be immersed in the culture and expectations of the industry, and you'll spend a significant amount of time with our partners through work experience and industry placements. We're currently in late stage talks with a number of global firms, including major airlines, aircraft manufacturers and airports, who'll provide enrichment opportunities, industry placements and apprenticeship and job opportunities for our IASD students. In the coming months, we'll be making announcements about these partners and we'll be sure to keep you updated every step of the way. So IASD Newark is one of the projects included in the recent Towns Fund announcement, and we're working towards having a brand new facility being built in the town in around 2 years' time. Our first intake of students will begin their studies in brand new phase 1 facilities at Newark College. They're being built right now and modified, and they'll be equipped with state-of-the-art facilities by our industry partners. Those students who progress to our IASD Newark degree courses will move into the new build facilities. In terms of Newark College, we're an Ofsted Good College, and we're really proud of the fact that Ofsted have praised us for our employer-led focus, for the high levels of support that we offer to our students, and for our focus on what they describe as the craft of teaching. Now, COVID-19 is clearly going to affect our recruitment cycle this year, so we're online this evening, but we're hoping to invite you into Newark College to meet our team from June onwards. And as soon as we're able to do that, we'll be in touch to give you the details. If you've expressed an interest in an IASD Newark course via the website, you do now need to fill in a full application, which you can do by visiting iasd-newark.co.uk. Once you've done that, one of our team will call you to discuss your applications and to make you a conditional offer. The conditions will be based on your exam results. The IASD courses are challenging and the conditions must be met for you to be accepted onto a level 3 course. If you don't meet those conditions, you may be able to enroll on a level 2 IASD feeder course. So you'll be able to progress up at a later date. This may also be a chance for you to resit English and Maths GCSEs if you didn't quite achieve the grades. Okay, so now I'm delighted to introduce you to industry expert, pilot and Aviation 360 associate, James Smart, who's going to take you through an overview of our pathways. Over to you, James.
Lovely, Jim. Thank you very much indeed for that that fine introduction. Just give me a wave if I'm being heard clearly, please. Good. Thank you very much. And you've got the first slide up. And what I'll do is I'll ask for next slide, please, when the time comes. So, as already introduced, I am a pilot. Worked professionally for nearly 40 years. Initially in the Royal Air Force, flying all around the world. Flown for various regional airlines, including turboprop and jet aircraft. Not only training other pilots, but working in the office, managing fleets, pilots, and latterly as head of crew training. And although I'm focused now on this project, I still fly air tests on airliners. I'm doing one next week, and next month I'm taking an aircraft down to its new owner in Australia. And the picture that I'm trying to paint here is that this course is industry designed and industry led. And that is important because it's the industry for whom you will work, and they need the right aviation professionals to come and work for them. So I'm going to introduce you to the 3 IASD pathways and how you will start your journey during the first 12 weeks of the 2-year course. I'll then hand over to Patricia Batista, and she's going to take you through the ground operations pathway. Then Mark Ryan will talk about the engineering pathway, and he in turn will hand over to Abby Witts, who will take you through the pilot pathway. And finally, Ross Tarnowski will explain your experience within the Newark College. And as Jim has already mentioned, we'll be able to answer some questions through the question and answer function. So the next slide you've done already, thank you. Looking at the industry and training, and looking at this title picture itself just shows the three pathways working together in the workplace: engineers servicing, checking and maintaining the aircraft; ground operations managing the passengers, safely loading the aircraft and coordinating all the activities on the ground to ensure a safe getaway; and the pilots are preparing for their next flight. And the third slide, please, Jim. We start with potential students and their parents or guardians, you, who help our future aviation professionals start their journey. And at the same time, there is a pull from industry. And I've worked in this industry, I've said, for nearly 40 years. And in that time, I have visited flying schools, interviewed and recruited countless pilots into airlines. So I know that the industry is really keen to see this new concept succeed. They want to see future employees receive a broad aviation education delivered at an early age. They need a well-rounded workforce who are motivated and passionate about their role. So it's important for us to attract students from a diverse background. I'm not a good example. I'm white, I'm male, I'm middle class. I like to think of myself as middle-aged. That's perhaps the traditional view of a pilot, but it is wrong. The key point here is that we recruit from a wide background, and then we're more likely to find better aviation professionals. So the aim of IASTE is to attract, educate, and retain. And if we select the right student and educate them the right way, then industry will be keen to employ the output and keep them for the long term. This whole program needs to be accessible to a wide selection of the community. And Newark, as Jim mentioned, is the first IASTE, but we're planning to see more nationwide and beyond. And next slide, Jim. So the three pathways are the three primary aircraft facing roles: pilot, engineer, and ground operations. They're not completely independent roles. They overlap and they depend upon each other. Where there are common areas, we will train as a whole and not individual pathways. We plan to connect the right people to the right jobs by selecting the right people and giving them the right skills, using the right equipment in the right facilities. They will be fully equipped to progress to the right job for them. So important for the individual, but also so important for the employer as they get a more sustainable workforce. And the next slide, Jim. So the learning strategy on the IASTE course covers these principles, starting in the top right. We ensure that students have the core knowledge by starting on a combined pathway. We ensure that they have the core skills via virtual reality training, role play, and work placement. And throughout the journey, they will enhance their personal development. They will develop the correct mindset, thinking safety first, working effectively as a team, being creative, developing their critical thinking, and being passionate about what they do. They will develop their aviation career plan, during which expectations will be managed, gaining self-awareness of their competencies, awarenesses of the challenges and opportunities ahead, and become ready for recruitment with their personal action plan. Once completing this course, they will either be ready to enter the workplace or continue their education by progressing to a Bachelor of Science degree in aviation. So on the next slide, please, Jim. And we're looking at the combined pathway. So this is the first 12 weeks of the three pathways. Engineering, ground operations, and pilots interact daily as a team with the shared goal of ensuring that an aircraft departs on time, safely, and compliant with regulations. As I've outlined, rather than train these three roles apart, we're bringing them together at the very beginning, where they will learn some core skills and appreciate each other's role whilst achieving their objectives. In fact, the two-year course, as you can see from the graphic on the right at Newark, is only part of the overall journey we're planning. We're introducing sections to those under the age of 16 too, with the aim of helping people achieve their goals from an earlier stage. And the next slide, please, Jim. So during the combined pathway, the students will be revisiting some basic subjects such as math, science and English, and will be introduced to some new aviation topics such as air traffic control, air law, operations, environmental sustainability, security and safety. There will be some practical exercises such as inspecting aircraft, towing, marshalling, communications, engine running, all used using a variety of teaching methods, including virtual reality. Throughout, there'll be personal development where students will explore their self-identity, social skills, career life goals, and will develop their own aviation career plan. And once the combined pathway element is complete, the students will move on to one of the 3 specific pathways. So what I'm going to do now is hand you over to Patricia, and Patricia is going to take you through the ground operations pathway.
Thank you very much, James. Can everybody hear me well? If I could, thank you, Jim. So, like James said, I'm going to be talking about one of the pathways on this groundbreaking project, which is the ground operations. I'm going to say a little bit about myself, not a very long story. I've started in aviation about 25 years ago, so maybe a long story, but I'm going to cut it short. I was 18, so probably about the age that many of you will be when you finish this 2-year course. And although I say that my first job in aviation was as a cabin crew, and probably the real job was, my first experience on the job was actually ground operations over a summer holiday. Eventually, I've done the cabin crew job and I returned to ground operations, and since then, that's where I've stayed. So I've been through a number of operational roles, management roles, but for the past 10 years, I'm working in what my real passion is, which is people. And so I've dedicated myself to training and development, so operational training from an industry point of view. But I've worked a lot with college students and university graduates as well, exactly to bring that industry perspective. And it was with that vision, because myself on the job, I've realized that it would be important to know a little bit more than I knew to do my job better. It was with that vision that Simon Witt invited me to become the ground operations pathway lead and associate and develop this pathway. So Jim, if you could just pass on to the next slide. So the focus of the ground operations pathway is the flight dispatcher. Mostly people understand the pilot's job and they understand the engineer's job. But in ground operations, everything gets a little messy because there's so many departments involved in turning around an aircraft. So who's the person accountable for making sure they co-share the responsibility with the pilot that the aircraft is safe to take off? Well, that's the flight dispatcher, a role that requires a high level of knowledge, some of that knowledge at the level of pilot and engineers, that needs to understand how everything else works around an airport in order for this aircraft to take off safely. And so rather than have a course just for a flight dispatcher role, we decided that the flight dispatcher should not only have the same knowledge or ground-based knowledge as pilots and engineers, but also to understand pretty much the overall of everything that involves an aircraft turnaround. So usually in the industry, we call the flight dispatchers the ground-based co-pilots because that's what they are. For as long as the aircraft is on the ground, they'll be the person responsible to ensure that every department works within the regulations, the safety procedures. And so we designed this pathway in a way that will give 18-year-old students knowledge and confidence to then choose which path in their career they want to take, but also in which role they would like to perform. Jim, would you, next slide, please. So the next generation of flight dispatchers, as our view, will be that they begin, as James said earlier on, with a combined educational pathway with pilots and engineers. then the focus will be very much on the aircraft dispatch, but they will also learn the role of centralized load control. They will learn the role of the airport operations, the ramp operations, and the passenger handling. So if something happens on the ramp, on the aircraft, and a mistake or a delay or anything at all, and a dispatcher with this level of knowledge would be able not only to perform as an aircraft dispatcher, but also to perform in every other role. So you might start your career as an aircraft dispatcher, but if, for example, you have the opportunity in starting any other role, you can also perform there. And that makes a flight dispatcher highly skilled, but also highly employable at the age of 18. And this is something we don't have at the moment. And therefore, that's how we're going to try and tackle this shortage of staff, because it's a highly skilled role that we don't really have candidates with the right profile. Next slide, please, Jim. So what exactly is then the ground operations pathway? It's a new training route for aspiring aircraft dispatchers that can either work in commercial or military aviation. What this course has new, because there are other courses in aviation operations or in ground operations, but what this course has new is that it brings the industry and the academic needs together. And therefore, what we'll be teaching students, it's the practical knowledge as well as the practical skills and the core behaviors that are required to be confident out there on the ramp dealing with all of these people. So being confident also on the choices and on the knowledge and on the performance that you might have at the age of 18. Because at the age of 18, you will be asked to have choices, to make choices, either to go to university or to the market that you probably think you're too young. So the more confident you feel, the better choices you will make. So you'll be a cross-trained aircraft dispatcher. You are also able to perform in load control or ramp operations, airport operations, or passenger handling. And we're going to connect you students with industry leaders, industry aircraft dispatchers, or from any other role, and you'll have a total understanding of the entire ground operations roles and interventions in an aircraft turnaround. So we're going to do this, like James said, through virtual reality, simulated real-life scenarios, real-life resources, work experience, industry visits. So you'll have the opportunity to shadow and listen from actual active employees at the moment at the airports, where they're going to talk about their reality. And that's something that it's really important and valuable. Next slide, Jim. Thank you. So the way the pathway has been developed and the way it consists, so you have a combined pathway in the beginning, the first term of year one. You will then move on to an aviation operations qualification that will be quite extensive, where you're going to be learning a lot of in-depth knowledge, theoretical knowledge, including modules like the pilots and the engineers in terms of meteorology, navigation, communications. So you understand weight and balance, you know, how can an aircraft take off with, what's the weight limits, what's the balance, all of the things pilots would need to know, flight dispatchers will too. We will then training and work a lot on your confidence, on your personal skills, on your self-identity, on the behavior required to work in such a pressured environment, so you feel confident about it. And we will then cover all the knowledge and the skills required in partnership with the industry in order for you to have a full range of the experience to the whole spectrum, not just academic, but also industry. Next slide. Thank you, Jim. So the core elements of this ground operations pathway for the flight dispatcher will be that you'll go through the airport operations and understand things like emergency procedures or airfield operations, or how to deal with the passenger terminal management when there's delays or cancellations, how to deal with wildlife management, which is a great factor for the safety of the aircraft, airport commercial operations. All of these are things that are necessary in order for a flight dispatcher to be a full package. In ramp handling or ramp operations, what is the safety code, how the baggage processing goes, how the ground service equipment can be used in order to get the aircraft to take off, the airside driving, everything that is dangerous to go inside or out of an aircraft, all of these things necessary will be done. The aircraft dispatcher and the load control, the centralized control roles are very similar. They're sort of interlinked with each other. And this is where we'll be giving lots of focus. So aircraft performance, landing performance, flight planning, navigation, weight and balance. And for this, you will really need to be a student that has an understanding of good maths, good English, good science, because it will be ambitious and you will need to be motivated to achieve the right grades. And then in passenger handling, which is very important, which is more of the customer service and the people skills that you will require to deal with the actual primary client, which is passengers. So we will cover the full spectrum of these core elements alongside practical activities where you will actually do this job, whether within the college setting with simulated scenarios or with systems or with virtual reality training or at the airport in itself. Next slide, Jim, thank you. Oh, so we don't have another slide. So I finish here and I'll move on. So I could just carry on for the rest of the afternoon, I must say, when I'm talking about this. So in order for you to become a flight dispatcher, you'll have to go through this entire process. It's 2 years, like I said. You will have opportunity throughout the actual ground operations course to engage with the pilot pathway students as well, but I'm sure Abby will talk about that a little later. And I hope you feel as passionate about this as I do. As you can see, I could just carry on. But I now hand it over to Mark, which will be talking to you about, Mark Ryan, about the engineering pathway.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Excellent overview of the ground pathway. So my name's Mark Ryan. I'm an aircraft engineer. Been working as an aircraft engineer for around about the last 35 years, working in line maintenance, base maintenance, and also including aircraft manufacture as well. I'm also a B1, B2 and A licensed aircraft engineer, certified to release all different types of aircraft from Boeing, Embraer and modern jet aircraft. Also worked as a station maintenance manager for about 18 years, looking after a hub operation based at London City Airport. So as James mentioned earlier, I too was responsible for bringing young students into the operation and therefore understand the requirements of what industry require from the students to be able to become excellent aircraft engineers. I've also worked as a flying engineer across UK and Europe, where I've supported aircraft in operation, carrying out sort of roles throughout Europe where I'd be flying with the aircraft to ensure that the aircraft remained serviceable for the duration of the mission. So let's look at the aircraft engineering pathway. Thank you, James. So the course has been designed with industry, and that's a real key point, industry, to ensure that you will have the theoretical knowledge, practical experience, and the required core skills, competencies, and behaviours to become an aircraft engineer. From this course, students could go straight into industry, for instance, working for an airline, as I have, or a maintenance and repair organisation, MRO, carrying out routine maintenance on aircraft structures and systems. And this could actually also lead to a aircraft maintenance license category A1. There are other options for students, both within the commercial and military areas of aircraft maintenance also. All students could continue to study their studies, carrying out the the BSc Honours Aviation Engineering degree course. Next slide, please, Jim. So the next generation of engineers will develop their theoretical knowledge, build their practical skills, and develop a high level of competency and safety on an industry-led course interacting with pilots and ground operations students to gain an overall vision of an airline or maintenance operation. Next slide, please, Jim. The pathway is designed by industry to meet industry standards. Therefore, students will gain a bespoke course, which ensures the students will not only have the theoretical and practical experience, but will have the additional core skills and competencies that industry demand. Like the other pathways, you will meet industry leaders, visit airports, and study the subjects required for the role. Next slide, please, Jim. After the combined pathways, as James mentioned earlier, students will learn a combination of theoretical and practical subjects. During the theoretical studies, students will develop the required knowledge regarding aircraft systems and structures, including theory of flight, flight controls and aircraft systems, such as electrical, mechanical, and avionic systems. The practical element of the pathway will ensure that the student meets the demands of industry with regards to hand skills and maintenance techniques, using specialised aircraft tooling, aircraft structures, and system training aids and virtual reality. The practical sessions will be carried out in a controlled environment to simulate the actual approved workplace with the associated procedures in place. So that's an overview of the engineering pathway. I will now hand you over to Abby, who will carry on running through the pilot pathways.
Thank you very much, Mark. Can everyone hear me okay? Just to check. Yeah, perfect, thanks. So hi everyone, I'm Abby. I'm currently a first officer working out of London City Airport, as well as Mark used to. And yeah, so at the moment, not that much flying going on, unfortunately, but it is the pandemic, can't do much about that. But had the opportunity to join A360 alongside James to create this pilot pathway. So a bit of information for you all that don't know me. I came into the industry about 8 years ago now. I started very different to everyone else. So I went into the pilot recruitment side to begin with, and I spent a few years there learning the tips and tricks, I guess, for the interview selections and what it actually entails to actually go through all of that. From there on, I actually was cabin crew for Monarch for a long time, or about a year, I say a long time, because I wanted to understand from what it's actually like to be on the line, is not necessarily the pilot side at that point, but I just wanted to understand what it was like in that industry. So there, I have always had the inspiration. Sorry, I can't talk today. The inspiration to be a pilot. I necessarily didn't have the confidence, and that was probably my problem as to why I delayed it for quite a long time. And I think definitely being cabin crew was the best choice I ever made, but not only because I saw everything from a different perspective, but I also had the chance to sit in on landing and all that exciting stuff. But yeah, so then I went into training in 2017 and I finished in 2019, and I've been flying since. So yeah, I think my main point that will probably be across this will be there hasn't ever really been a clear pathway on how to become a pilot, especially at this age. It's always been from either degree, where it's a bit, if you want to get a degree, or you have to go and train. And this is where we're trying to, if you wanted to become a doctor, you would have a clear route on how to do all of that. But this is where we're starting to lead with this pathway. So next slide, please. So as I said before, the focus is the pilot pathway. So we are necessarily the accountable person for the safety of the aircraft. We are skilled professionals who really have the knowledge and the skill and the confidence to fly an aircraft safely from departure to destination. I think as well, what comes out of this pathway is having a bigger knowledge base, not just from being a pilot. From what my experience and obviously James' experience, we found that we actually work a lot with the ground and the engineers, and having that, and obviously the cabin crew, and there are a lot more roles that we haven't discussed, but having that experience and knowledge that that is how everything works is very vital for the role too. But also having the practical experience and building the confidence from day one for the role in the first place. The pathway has been developed with industry. So all the way through, we have been getting feedback from the industry of what's been required, and also building it with the foundations to become either in the airline or the military career. Next slide, please. So here's our ideal next generation of pilots, what we basically want out of the pathway. So we have a combined pathway with ground and engineers. So as I said before, it's not just, for now, we have the pilots that mainly focus on their roles, but we're trying to bring them in to actually see the other roles for what they are, because we do have a lot of similarities between them. We have finally brought in the theoretical knowledge of pilots into the younger generation, and as I said, partnered with industry. And also we are doing aviation operations for pilots as well. And we are also including a lot of non-technical skills. So for those that aren't aware, it's things like the human factors side. So dealing with the confidence building and just the team leadership and management and that kind of side of things, which it's not so new in the industry, but it's very important at the moment. But especially from building yourself up from that level, I wouldn't say it's a hard, I think the problem with the pilot role is everyone sees it as unattainable. And I wouldn't say it is, it's just the confidence and just the understanding of getting it there, and the actual understanding of the role in general. And then also the flying experience we are going to hopefully be including. Next slide, please. So what is the pilot pathway? So here it says a brand new training route, which hasn't ever been done before for your career as a professional pilot. So we are embedding the requirements of pilot training into the education system, which hasn't ever been done before. It leads on to a practice-based degree, and it integrates the required professional pilot training for that. And students will meet industry leaders, visit airports, experience flying, and study the pilot theoretical knowledge. Next slide, please. So the core elements of the pathway may not seem a lot, but there is a lot behind the words there. So the pilot theoretical knowledge there is basically everything. If you were to go study a PPL or a professional pilot license, they are the subjects that you would cover, which again haven't been introduced into the education system. And then alongside that, as we are widening the opportunities, but also the awareness, we are doing aviation operations for pilots too. And then alongside that, as I said before, the non-technical or the crew resource management side as well. And then next slide, please. So here is, this isn't just pilot now, this is future engineer, ground dispatcher or pilot. And it shows basically in general what the ideal student will come out of the pathway with. So academic achievement, complete well-being, personal direction, being a well-rounded individual, being an effective communicator, and having social and cultural values. And on to the next slide, please. And this is where I hand over to Ross.
Hi, Abby, thank you very much for that. Really good introduction and detail around the pilot pathway. What I'm going to do now is go into a bit more detail of the actual 3 study programs and the detail around what you'll actually be doing at college as part of the IASTE pathways. Next slide, please, Jim. So most of the bullet points you can see on the screen there have already been introduced, but the part I'd like to really go through here is that what you are seeing and what's been introduced across the 3 pathways are these unique and innovative reverse engineered curriculums designed by industry and co-designed with our other key partners and employers. All of these reverse engineered curriculums ensure that you are getting the right skills, knowledge, competencies and behaviours to be successful in the industry. Next slide, please. So going into a bit more detail, a study programme consists of various elements. One of those elements is around continued professional development and progress reviews, which will take part as part of the overall study programme. And the other part of the course is your vocational technical qualification that you'll undertake. So you'll be assigned a progress coach who will work with you to ensure that you're successful as part of your program. They'll help with any issues with regards to study and learning, because it is different coming from school environment or an external environment onto one of our study programs. As part of the study program, it's built around a business model, which means you'll be spending approximately 30 hours per week within the IASTE over an academic year. So it's not like some of your peers and some other people who might go into an FE study program and would only be expected to do 2.5 days a week at college. There's an expectation with this program that it is 5 days a week, and therefore built around a business model of being in employment already. So we're already starting to get you ready for the world of work. You'll also participate in what's called the NCS scheme, the National Citizen Service Scheme. And this takes place at the start of year one and gives you a huge range of core transferable skills that you can take back into industry, you can use as part of your course. And it's all built around communication, team skills, group work, communication, and just being effective as part of that team and giving your views and parts across. It also links into what we call social action, and that gives you the opportunity to work with your team and give back to the local community based around a charity project. You'll also undertake various enrichment activities, and enrichment activities do what they say on the tin. They enrich the experience for you as part of your study program. So you'll undertake a number of trips, visits, and there'll be guest speakers that come into the IASTE, and also you might go out into industry to speak to those guest speakers. So all of those enrichment activities take place across the academic year. All of our education, as I previously mentioned, is employer-led. So we have our technical training and we have our trips, visits, guest speakers and enrichment activities to supplement that technical training. So you'll be given a whole host of skills, knowledge and behaviours and competencies so that you are successful when you move forward with your chosen career path. We'll also be wearing an IASTE uniform that all students will be expected to wear across the 3 pathways. And this will be a modern, cool looking uniform that you'll be expected to wear. And actually, it gives you that ownership of being part of the IASTE and being able to walk around campus and show that you are an IASTE student. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to go into a bit more detail about the 3 pathways and starting with aircraft engineering. This is a level 3 study program that you'll be undertaking, and it's the City and Guilds Diploma in Aircraft Maintenance. Now, I'd like to point out for all 3 of our pathways, they are 2 years in duration, and I need to make that very, very clear. Some of our other programs that you could enroll on, there'd be an exit point at year 1, which means you could leave with a lower level qualification. With all of the industry units and modules that we'll be undertaking, combined alongside your technical qualification, means that the duration of the course is 2 years. So if you leave early and don't stay to the end of the 2 years duration, you won't leave with a recognised qualification. So I just want to make that clear to everyone at this point. With regards to the aircraft engineering entry qualifications, you will require 5 GCSEs at a minimum of grade 4, and that must include English language, maths, and an approved science-based subject. We've already looked at some of the aircraft engineering subjects that Mark eloquently pointed out that you'll be undertaking. So there'll be a range of both practical activities and theoretical knowledge to underpin the aircraft engineering qualification and the units that you'll be undertaking as part of the overall pathway. Next slide, please. Ground operations is the same. It's a level 3 study program, and this time you'll be studying for a BTEC diploma in aviation operations. Again, on this pathway, just as the same as aircraft engineering, it's 2 years in duration. There's a slight change with the ground operations entry criteria where a science-based subject is not required, but there is still a recognised grade 4 maths and English language. And as you can see there with regards to the subjects, exactly the same in terms of what Patricia eloquently spoke about again with dispatch, marshalling and various other topics covered. Next slide, please, Jim. Pilot, again, you will receive a BTEC diploma in aviation operations as part of that course. Again, it is 2 years in duration, and you will need 5 GCSEs at a minimum of grade 4, which will include English language, maths, and an approved science-based subject. To put it into context for all 3 level 3 study programs, both the aircraft engineering and the ground are equivalent to approximately 2 A levels with the diplomas, and the pilot pathway is equivalent to approximately 1.5 A levels, because it's a slightly lower diploma in aviation operations due to the amount of industry information and units that you'll be undertaking alongside that pathway. Next slide, please. We're currently under development with UCLan with regards to 3 higher education programs that you can see on the screen there. I'm sure there might be a number of questions around the higher education programs and the progression from further education and a study program into the HE pathways. And we'll try and answer as much as we can during this evening, but it might be that we do get back to you with a written answer, as I said, because they are under current development and they're not fully written and developed as a course yet. Next slide, please. Any questions?
Okay, thank you to all of our panelists there. That was a really comprehensive overview of IASTE Newark. We're now going to work through some questions. I can see it's nice to see we've got some waiting. I'm going to start with one from Claire on Facebook. I think it's a really good question. Considering what's happened to the travel industry with COVID, will there be jobs waiting for us after the course? James, do you want to come in and start that?
Yeah, of course I will. And you know, we have to be 100% honest and say we can't look into the future. However, you can often see into the future by looking into the past. And in my experience within the aviation world, it's had its upsets in the past. I remember when the UK airspace was closed with a volcano that began with E and I can't pronounce in Iceland that closed the airspace, and that had a significant hit on the aviation industry and others, but it bounced back. A couple of years before that, there was the economic turndown in 2008, and it had a significant turn back. And some of you might remember 19 years ago, 9/11, and that significant turn back with aviation. So it's something that happens, but each time it's bounced back. So my prediction is it'll bounce back now, and you could be starting at just the right time to ride the wave in 2 years' time. But of course, we don't know.
Great. Okay. Thank you, James. Tommy on the call is asking, can we apply to multiple course branches, i.e. engineering and pilot? I'll bring Ross in here. I think you have to apply and start on a pathway, but there is that common curriculum period, Ross, isn't there? And we're quite open to transferring. So I guess if you start the course and you decide you picked the wrong pathway, you could change.
Yeah, correct, Jim. I think there's a number of options there. As we've said, the start of all 3 pathways is a common curriculum. So if you start that particular pathway and you think, actually, this isn't right for me, as long as you meet the academic requirements to change pathways, then there is always the option to switch over, providing that there's an opportunity to do that and we have space on those particular pathways to enable that. But you would actually apply for one pathway, which would be your preferred route initially, and then we could always reevaluate a particular change if that was necessitated.
Great. And while you're there, Ross, we have an anonymous question here from someone who describes themselves as a 30-something-year-old who's working in the engineering sector, and he obviously wants to progress his or her career, and is asking, is this suitable? We don't have a part-time evening version of this, but I'm guessing they would have to commit to full-time study. Is that right?
Correct, yeah, they'd have to commit to full-time study and obviously meet the entry criteria as well. The reason we have that entry criteria there from a level 3 perspective and above is just due to the nature of the academic work that's involved, both from mainly from a theoretical perspective when we're talking about maths and science requirements as part of that course. So depending on that individual application, then we could obviously look at that, review it, and make a decision based on having a conversation with that individual.
Great. And Ruben on the call is currently in year 10. We mentioned earlier about learning before the age of 16. I know we're working with some local schools to try and develop feeder pathways into the IASTE. James, is that something you could touch on?
Yeah, a little bit like that university degree. It is something that's work in progress. I just wanted to put it out there in case any others who either had younger siblings could see, so that they could see that we were working on the pathway of not just being a 2-year program, but starting earlier and continuing afterwards as the 3 pathway leads described. But no, you're quite right. We're still working with the schools with the view to rolling it out. And as I think I mentioned in my presentation, this is the first ASTI project that we're working on. So it grow out in both directions before and after this particular 2-year program.
Okay, so Ruben, there may be potential over the next year or so for you to get involved in a feeder program, but certainly keep an eye on IASTI Newark, and when you've reached the right age, please do put in an application. Okay, Nana, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Nana is asking, how are you affected by the increase in policy surrounding climate change and the environment? So I know we have a keen focus on sustainability here. Perhaps James or Mark, if you want to hop in and talk briefly about that.
Yeah, I saw that question pop up, and I wasn't sure if the question was related at the college or at the industry. So if I answer it from an industry perspective, then perhaps, Jim, you'd like to pick it up from a college perspective. So from an industry, I think all industries at the moment are under the spotlight to do better and to improve what we're doing and the way we do it. And as far as the course is concerned, there is a module on environmental sustainability. So it's something that you will learn about on the course. And certainly when I was a student pilot, I'm ashamed to say it wasn't something that was considered. Now it is, and it's considered for both an economic standpoint, because we want to use less fossil fuels, etc., because it makes the airlines more profitable. But we also know that to have valued customers, they want to see that we are doing the same as well.
Great. Okay, thanks, James. And Nana, if it was from a college perspective, we are, as James said, we are very much focused on ways to improve our green credentials and reduce our carbon footprint. We're currently undertaking a review of that at the moment. We have a Green College project ongoing to see how we can collaborate with local authorities and other businesses to work towards reducing our carbon impact as well. Okay, we have another anonymous question. Would the engineering qualification be recognised by the RAF as I'm considering a career in the RAF after the course? Well, luckily the RAF is one of our key partners for IASTI Newark. Ross, as a former Royal Air Force serviceman yourself, do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, sure. All qualifications are recognised by the Royal Air Force. In terms of accredited prior learning, i.e. would you have to undertake another engineering qualification when you joined the Air Force? The answer is yes. You wouldn't get accredited prior learning for doing this qualification when you actually went into the Air Force. You would undertake an advanced apprenticeship in engineering as part of your pathway within the Royal Air Force as you progressed as an aircraft engineer. However, if the course, if you're looking to go into the Royal Air Force directly from an engineering course, there might be other options that might be more suitable to you. And that's something that we can certainly pick up with, because we do have an Air and Defence College where if it's understanding and learning about the military aspects and then taking a Royal Air Force career rather than a civil or commercial route, then that might be a more suitable pathway given what you just noted.
Okay, and Ross, while you're there, someone's also asking about the kind of shape of the timetable and what amount of time per week would you spend in college roughly?
Anywhere between 4 and 5 days a week, depending on what section of the course you were on. That would be made up of both theoretical lessons through the week. As I mentioned before about the enrichment activities, so trips, visits and guest speakers, there'd be 2 trips or visits or enrichment activities per term. So that would lead to anywhere between 6 and 8 activities that would be planned into the curriculums. And that would include both going off of campus and visiting various locations. It might be an airbase, an airbase, an airport, going to an air museum, having people come in to deliver particular leadership and team skills opportunities. So to develop those core transferable skills when you go into employment. Around that time, you're looking at about between 9 AM and 4 PM in college is our general kind of college day. With the IASTI program, there might be times where you've got to come in early if we're going on a particular trip or visit. It might be that you have to stay slightly later depending on what's actually happening in college that week and what units you're actually undertaking. So it is quite a full-on program for a young person to undertake, or even someone who's coming from external and they might be slightly older and want to undertake this particular unique educational model.
Okay, and Lisa is asking, obviously Lisa's not local to Newark. Obviously I don't know how far away you live, Lisa, but she's asking about options for boarders. We don't currently have student accommodation associated with IASTE Newark, but if you're in a position to live independently, we do work with local landlords to find suitable accommodation for our students. We have other programs like a musical instrument craft program where people travel from all over the UK and Europe to come and study in Newark. So we could deploy the same services that we do for people. So I don't know whether that helps, Lisa. If you want to have a further conversation about it, we do have your email address, so we could perhaps get in touch with you after the call if you could give us a bit more detail. Kieran's asking if there's an age limit to the course. Is it just for school leavers? Ross, do you want to come in there?
It is primarily aimed at school leavers, but it certainly doesn't preclude anyone from applying for a place on the course, independent of age. I think if someone is really keen to get into the industry and they're looking at one of these three focus pathways, then they could certainly undertake that. The sticking point there is, depending on age and depending on previous qualifications, then there would be potentially a fee to pay for the course. But even for all of our courses, it's not necessarily having to pay all of that money up front. We do have advanced learner loans, different bursary options and funding options that are available to all learners, irrespective of age.
Great, and that kind of links to an anonymous question we have here. Someone who's due to complete their A levels this year, would they be eligible? Yes, they would be eligible, but potentially there could be some cost incurred there, Ross.
Yes, exactly the same principle there. Generally, if someone's already got a level 3 qualification and depending on age, i.e. 19 plus, then they wouldn't have that first level 3 paid for, and they have to then fund that an alternative way via one of the methods I just mentioned.
Yeah, I can probably link that to another question from Niall, who's asking about the university qualifications, because it may be worth waiting 12 months, because we will start advertising those degree level qualifications next year, subject to validation with UCLAN. But they are, as we said at the outset, they're under development at the moment. So we don't have huge amounts of detail as we're still working through that. Okay. Kyan, hopefully again I'm pronouncing that right, Kyan. It's not a stupid question at all, Kyan. Kyan wears glasses. Could that affect her career as a pilot, James? Or it doesn't affect her getting onto this course, obviously, but
correct. And the answer is it depends. So I think this is something probably where we're going to need to do a bit of work, Jim, and give people access to the medical requirements to be a professional pilot, and that is from a commercial point of view, and then the RAF will have its standards as well. In a nutshell, if your vision is 100% corrected with the corrective lenses, then the answer is that they will normally, that would normally be fine, but it does depend on the reason for wearing glasses and the result of those glasses. So the RAF have gone through phases where they've wanted what was called 20/20 or now 6/6 vision, but those standards do vary over time, and the Civil Aviation Authority do allow glasses, but they have to be corrected 100% to perfect vision.
Okay. We thank you for that, James. We have another question here. Given the number of places available, what's the likelihood of getting a place, ratio of applicants to places, etc.? So we have had a huge amount of interest in these courses. People have completed expressions of interest. The next stage, as I mentioned at the outset, is to go back onto the website where you can now complete a full application. To date, around 25 people have completed full applications. that is out of around 175 people who've expressed an interest. We do not have 175 places. So the message there is get onto the website, submit an application. We will prioritize places based on those who meet the entry requirements and the date of the application received. So the sooner you get a full application in, the more likely you are to secure a place. So hopefully that helps. After I finish the pilot pathway, will I have job opportunities opened up straight away, or will we need to do more training or extra qualifications? So I guess, James, this is one for you as well.
Yeah, it is. So yes, technically it is possible to go straight into paid employment at the end of this course, for example, with the military, where they would then employ you, take you through a flying training program, which in the case of the RAF and the Royal Navy would take 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years, depending on what's going on. And yes, so yes, you can. If you want to be a civil pilot, however, then the next step after this course is to go to either the degree course that we're developing, which combines both the a Bachelor of Science with honours degree in aviation for pilots with an airline transport pilot's license, and that course makes you is the flying element of the course, and then makes you fully employable as a pilot in either an airline, business jet, or as a flight instructor.
Okay, and I guess that leads to the other question below that. Well, when we finish the pilot course, we will be able to work in different countries as a pilot. So you wouldn't be a fully qualified pilot by the end of it, but obviously the career opens up lots of opportunities for international travel. Okay, Ross, if I just bring you in, this is probably one for you. Louis is currently doing a level 3 aviation course at Derby College, which they finish in June or July. It's only a 1-year course. Would the ISD pilot course be a repeat year of what I've already done? I suppose we need a conversation really about what units have been completed and how comparable they are.
Yeah, definitely. Some of the units might be the same units on the course that's being undertaken at Derby College. But the thing to understand here is it's not just a BTEC Level 3 diploma in aviation operations. It's a whole raft of industry modules that have been developed by industry to support someone going into that particular sector. So not just the technical qualification, but all of the other modules and units that be undertaken as part of the course are completely unique and new. And this is, as we said, it's a brand new breakthrough course and qualification attached to this course. But ultimately, a lot of the lessons, units, modules that will be undertaken won't have been seen before, so they'll be completely new.
Okay, so Louis, it sounds like you'd be well placed to secure a place on the ISD course once you've completed your qual, but you need to do the full ISD course. If you'd like a conversation about that and whether there's any wriggle room there, we've got your contact details, and we can put Ross in touch with you later on this week. Okay. So there seems to be a recurring theme about people doing A-levels and wanting to transfer onto the course. I think we've covered that one off. And Penny, you've answered some of those questions as well. I'll just check on Facebook. We have one question around uniform, Ross, and costs for that. I know we have bursaries available for those struggling to meet the costs of things like uniform and academic equipment. Could you talk us through what the uniform might look like and approximate costs?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So what we're looking at the moment is, as I said, a modern, quite cool uniform. So we're looking at space grey polos and t-shirts alongside a smart, almost like flying jacket, bomber jacket, type outer jacket. These are going to be both in obviously men's and ladies fit, with our IASTI logo on as well, to identify you as an IASTI student. The outer garments would be, so the flying jacket is like a black color, as I said, space gray for your polo t-shirt and potentially a shirt as well. And then we're not looking for necessarily a smart formal uniform like a military uniform, but we are looking for, you know, day-to-day wear would be a smart pair of either black tracksuit bottoms, black jeans, and then more formal. So when we do have guest speakers coming in, or we're going out into industry, we do look professional and we do look part of the IASTI, and we want to make sure that all of our students look like that. In terms of cost, we're looking between £85 and £100 for the full uniform package. And as you rightly said, Jim, there are bursary opportunities and various grants available for you know, people who might be struggling to afford that particular amount for a uniform.
Okay, great. There are a range of questions around people who are either over 18 or are currently doing their A-levels. All of these questions are slightly different, so it's a little bit dangerous for us to give a blanket answer on whether you'd need to pay any fees or whether you'd be eligible for learner loans, because the criteria are quite complicated. So what we will do, we have the contact details of everyone on this call. We will send out some information in the next 2 days to everyone, specifically about people who are not school leavers, about their options as to whether they would need to pay for their course, and the various support that's available to help you pay if you need to. So rather than try and answer 4 or 5 with slightly different answers that could be a little bit confusing, we will contact you all with that information in the next 2 days or so. Okay, we'll end on a general question for James. I think, are you worried about automation replacing pilots, or is it?
Well, I think I'm at the age where the answer is no, but no, I cannot see a time within the next 5 to 10 years where there'll be a complete replacement of pilots with automation. However, artificial intelligence is moving apace. Only this week we saw a helicopter take off and land on the surface of Mars, and so whether the question perhaps will be, do I see pilots disappear altogether? No. Will they be on the aircraft? Possibly not, but that might take 15, 20 years for that to happen.
And while you're on, James, obviously this is the Air and Space Training Institute. That you know, that's probably a good point to mention that, you know, we're through the pilot pathway, we're potentially training people to work in space.
Yeah, and I'd expand that, not just the pilot pathway, but the engineering and the ground operations pathway as well. So as the UK space industry develops, there will be, there are already, but there will be more and more careers develop within that sector. And I think that for all 3 roles, the first step for the astronaut is to become a pilot. Have a look at Tim Peake. He was a military helicopter pilot first. The majority of astronauts followed a similar route, flying fast jets or others, and ditto the engineering. The majority of the engineering staff started off in the aerosystems before moving into space, and I'm sure Patricia would agree from a ground ops point of view. They would you know, start off working in aviation and then progress and move on, if that's what they wanted, to the space sector. I see, Patricia, you got your hand up. Do you want to take over on that one?
Just to compliment, actually, James, to say that during the time I've worked on preparing pilots for recruitment and selection assessment centers, I have trained probably over 50 pilots that were flight dispatchers beforehand. That was the route they chose, or the route they could have the door open in order to reach there. So you could potentially see one day an astronaut that was a pilot, but before that was a flight dispatcher.
Yep.
And it was just really to complement that all 3 pathways could well be ending up somewhere in space, Jim.
Great, and hopefully one of our ISD Newark students will one day.
Hopefully.
Okay, thank you all so much for your time. We've gone slightly over, so apologies for that, but we got some great questions there, and hopefully we've given you most of the answers you need. As I said, we'll send out some supplementary information in the next couple of days to cover off some of those more complex ones. To wrap up then, if you haven't applied already, then please visit isd-newark.co.uk. Submit your full application. If you submitted an expression of interest in the first few weeks when we launched the program, then please do revisit the website and put in a full application. The earlier we get your application, the greater the chance that you'll secure a place for ISD Newark. This won't be your only opportunity to engage. We will be holding future open days, and we'll communicate those dates with you. As I said at the outset, the minute we've got the confidence to invite you a large group into the campus, then we will do so, and we'll give you a look around, show you where the phase 1 facilities will be at Newark College, show you some artists' impressions of what the new build ISD Newark will look like for when you progress onto your degree course. And also hopefully give you some goodies and make you feel very welcome and excited about starting your new course. So thank you very much for joining us. Take care of yourselves, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.